Have you ever wondered what happens when a massive fortune is left behind? Does it bring a family closer together, or does it tear them apart in a spectacular movie-like fashion? Today, we're diving into a story that's more dramatic than anything you'll see on TV, a real-life saga of wealth, secrets, and a courtroom battle that nobody saw coming. This isn't just about money. It's about promises, loyalty, and the surprising twists that can redefine a family's entire history. So, grab your popcorn, because this is one wild ride. The story begins with a man we'll call Richard Sterling, a business tycoon who built an empire from scratch. He was the kind of person everyone looked up to, sharp, driven, and fiercely dedicated to his family. His company was a household name, and his net worth was in the billions. He had 2 children, a son, Daniel, and a daughter, Clara. From the outside, the Sterlings looked like the perfect family. They lived in a sprawling estate, took lavish vacations, and seemed to have it all. Richard always told his children that family was everything. He groomed Daniel to take over the family business, sending him to the best schools and teaching him the ropes from a young age. Clara, on the other hand, was the free spirit. She pursued a career in art, far from the corporate world her father dominated. Despite their different paths, Richard always expressed equal love for both his children and promised them they would be taken care of equally. It was a promise he repeated countless times over the years at family dinners and holiday gatherings. But promises, as we'll soon see, can be interpreted in very different ways. When Richard passed away at the age of 85, the entire family gathered for the reading of his will. They expected a straightforward affair. The assets would be split down the middle, just as Richard had always said. Daniel would get controlling shares of the company to ensure its stability, and Clara would receive an equivalent value in other assets, cash, real estate, and stocks. It seemed simple, fair, and exactly what their father would have wanted. The lawyer cleared his throat, the room fell silent, and then came the bombshell. Richard's will was nothing like they had imagined. Instead of a 50-50th split, the will stated that Daniel would inherit nearly 90% of the entire estate, including full control of the company and the majority of the family's liquid assets. Clara, his beloved daughter, was left with a relatively small trust fund and a few pieces of art. The room was stunned. Clara felt a wave of disbelief wash over her. It was a betrayal, a complete contradiction of everything her father had ever promised. Daniel, on the other hand, wasn't as surprised. He argued that this was their father's way of protecting the business. He claimed that giving Clara a massive amount of liquid assets could destabilize the company if she decided to sell off shares or make rash financial decisions. He insisted their father was just being a savvy businessman, even in death. To him, this was about legacy, not favoritism. But Clara saw it differently. She remembered all those conversations, all those promises of equality. She couldn't believe her father would go back on his word so drastically. Was this really his final wish, or was something else at play? The will felt cold, impersonal, and completely out of character for the loving father she knew. The small trust fund felt less like a gift and more like a consolation prize, an afterthought. The rift between the siblings began to form that very day, growing wider with each passing moment of silence. Feeling betrayed and heartbroken, Clara decided she couldn't let this go. This wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about her father's true intentions and her place in the family. She decided to contest the will. This is where our story takes a turn into a full-blown courtroom drama. Clara hired a top-tier legal team, and the battle for the Sterling fortune began. Her lawyers started digging, and they immediately found some red flags. The will had been amended just a few months before Richard's death. His health had been declining rapidly during that time, and he was heavily medicated. Clara's legal team argued that Richard may not have been of sound mind when he signed the new document. They questioned whether he was fully aware of the drastic changes he was making. They also raised the issue of undue influence. This legal term refers to a situation where someone manipulates or pressures a person into changing their will. All eyes turned to Daniel. Had he used his father's vulnerable state to his advantage? Had he pressured his ailing father to rewrite the will in his favor? Daniel vehemently denied it. He claimed he was just being a devoted son, taking care of his father in his final days. He said his father made the changes willingly, after many long discussions about the future of the company. The court case became a public spectacle. The media had a field day with the billion-dollar family feud. Friends, former employees, and distant relatives were called to the witness stand. The family's private life was laid bare for the world to see. Stories of Richard's generosity and his love for both his children were contrasted with testimony about his declining mental state and his growing reliance on Daniel. Clara's team presented evidence from medical experts who testified that the combination of medications Richard was on could have caused confusion and impaired his judgment. Nurses who cared for Richard in his final months testified that Daniel was a constant presence, often controlling who could see his father and for how long. They painted a picture of an isolated old man, heavily influenced by the son, who stood to gain the most. Daniel's lawyers fought back hard. They portrayed Clara as a greedy, ungrateful daughter who was out of touch with the realities of the family business. They argued that Richard was a brilliant man until the very end and was perfectly capable of making his own decisions. They brought in their own experts who claimed his mind was still sharp, despite his physical frailties. They presented witnesses who swore Richard had been talking about protecting the company's legacy for years, and that this new will was the logical conclusion of that desire. The courtroom was a battlefield of conflicting narratives. Who was telling the truth? Just when it seemed like the case would devolve into a he said, she said stalemate, Clara's legal team made a shocking discovery. While combing through mountains of financial documents, junior paralegal found something unusual: a series of large, unexplained payments from a subsidiary of the Sterling Corporation to a private consultant. This consultant had no official role in the company, and the payments were disguised as strategic advisory fees. After more digging, they uncovered the truth. The consultant was a handwriting expert, and the payments were made just weeks before the new will was signed. Why would Daniel's side of the company be paying a handwriting expert around the time the will was changed? The plot thickened. Clara's team filed a motion to have the signature on the will analyzed by an independent court-appointed forensic document examiner. The tension in the courtroom was palpable on the day the expert was scheduled to present their findings. Everyone, Clara, Daniel, their lawyers, the press held their breath. The expert took the stand and laid out their analysis, comparing Richard's signature on the will to dozens of authenticated signatures from throughout his life. And then came the final, stunning revelation. The signature on the revised will was a forgery. It was a very, very good forgery, but a forgery nonetheless. The expert pointed out microscopic inconsistencies in the pressure, slant, and stroke formation that proved it could not have been written by Richard Sterling. The courtroom erupted. Daniel's face went pale. The entire foundation of his defense crumbled in an instant. The will that had granted him almost the entire family fortune was declared invalid. The court then reverted to Richard's previous will, the one written years earlier when he was in perfect health. And what did that will say? It said his estate was to be divided equally between his two children, just as he had always promised. Clara had won, but it was a bittersweet victory. She had proven her case and honored her father's true wishes, but the cost was immense. Her relationship with her brother was shattered, perhaps irreparably. The family name had been dragged through the mud, and the private pain of their father's passing had become a public drama. In the end, Clara received her rightful inheritance. She didn't seek to punish Daniel further. The public humiliation and the invalidation of the will were enough. She focused on her art and used a portion of her inheritance to create a foundation supporting young artists. A tribute to her father who, despite everything, had always encouraged her passions. This story is a powerful reminder that wealth can complicate even the strongest family bonds. It shows how easily things can go wrong when communication breaks down and suspicion takes root. It's a cautionary tale about the importance of clear, legally sound estate planning and having honest conversations with your loved ones about your wishes. The Sterling family learned this lesson the hard way, in a courtroom showdown that no one ever expected. What do you think? Was Daniel a calculating manipulator from the start, or did he get carried away trying to protect his father's legacy? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this story as fascinating as I did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible true stories. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.